But I believe we have been negotiating in good faith, albeit indirectly. Having said that, I wouldn't be stunned to learn that there were even back-channel discussions that we know nothing about. There almost always are. I'm sorry, Arno, I didn't make a note. So, could you repeat your?
With two bombers.
Oh yes, the two B-2s. I think it would probably take more than two B-2s.
Three.
But the point I was trying to make, and have made on other occasions, is that I think the capability is there, with precision strikes, to set back the Iranian nuclear weapons program. And I frequently try to make that point in contradistinction to those military analysts who say that if we were to resort to force with respect to Iran's nuclear weapons program, it would have to be a much larger attack on their leadership, on their air defenses, on a long list of things.
I mentioned to you their formidable asymmetrical retaliatory capabilities, and you shrugged your shoulders.
Well, I don't know how, I mean, I remember hearing a lot about Iraq's formidable capabilities in the United States, and it turned out while they had shipped weapons to some embassies, they really didn't have it. And, I mean, the Iranians have been able to assassinate people outside Iran, but I don't know how to judge that. Milt can probably judge that better than I can. But you'd have to brace yourself against that if you actually did take action. By the way, when you talk about the possibility of a military strike, and just to repeat again, I'm not advocating, people often say, but we don't know where all the targets are. And this is often taken as an argument for diplomacy. Well, if we don't know where the targets are, what do we expect to be contained within the document that the diplomats would negotiate? It's not inconceivable the Iranians would say, as we were negotiating, hey, by the way, we have these sites you don't know about, so we'll include those. But I doubt it. So we know what we know, and the inadequacy of the lack of comprehensiveness of our information affects both military and diplomatic options. As for ousting Saddam, Jim Loeb, as I said earlier, I was for ousting Saddam for a long time. I thought the best way to do it was politically. After 9/11, the issue became a different issue. The administration may have been wrong in judging this, but it judged that there was a risk that Saddam, who was believed to be in possession of stockpiles of weapons of mass destruction, and certainly had produced them in the past and had the capability to produce them again, posed an unacceptable risk to the United States. You've got to put yourself in the position that the administration was in after 9/11. You know, we suffer this unexpected attack. Hang on a second. And when the dust clears, they look around and say, what could happen next? Any administration would have felt compelled to ask that question. And of all the possible threats, the one that concerned them the most, and I think for good reason, was another attack, this time using a chemical or a biological weapon or a nuclear weapon or a radiological weapon. And so they made up a list of the countries that might be in a position to enable such an attack, not even necessarily to carry it out. And Iran was on that list. Would Saddam's removal by political means have opened the way to a better regime? There's certainly places in the world where that's happened. You wouldn't have democracy if we hadn't removed Marcos in the Philippines. If we hadn't removed Marcos, and you wouldn't have it in Spain, and you wouldn't have it in Portugal, and so on. So you can't impose democracy, but sometimes there are obstacles to democracy that as long as they're there, there's no hope. And in any case, the issue isn't so much democracy. It is it's representative government. It's a nation that does not engage in hostile and aggressive activity against its neighbors or against us. And you don't need a full-blown democracy for that, but dictatorships are the most perilous when it comes to the dangers of such behavior.
I'm sorry, if I may. My point was more, in your article you said, I know of no statement, public or private, by any neoconservative in or near government advocating the invasion of Iraq primarily for the purpose of promoting democracy or advancing some grand neoconservative vision. My argument is that the two letters that you signed and that were publicly distributed did evidence at least what I would call a grand neoconservative vision, at least for the Middle East.
Well, I don't have the letters in front of me, but
okay.
I certainly did not conceive of some grand vision. I thought the problem was how to deal with Iraq.
And if I may, just one. The second letter said that you signed said that the important thing was to understand that, quote, Israel's fight against terrorism
Oh,
is
yes.
our
All right,
fight.
I'll elaborate on that. But that certainly doesn't
Okay, and
constitute...
then we're going to wrap up.
That certainly doesn't constitute a grand vision. Look, we are plagued today by suicide bombers, aren't we? They're the most difficult threat to face because if people are prepared to die, they have options that our normal systems of security can't cope with very effectively. Suicide bombing achieved, well, prominence isn't quite the right word, but became the instrument of choice in terrorist attacks against the Israelis. And sadly, when it was only the Israelis who were the victim of suicide bombers, the rest of the world didn't take it all that seriously. I remember seeing an interesting survey in Jordan, for example. Something like 80% of the Jordanians applauded suicide bombers' martyrdom attacks against Israel until one was conducted in Amman, and then suddenly they turned and went 80% against it. I don't know whether this this death cult that has now been has become the method of choice for the extremists I worry most about would have developed if there had been greater solidarity or not. But Israel is under attack by people who believe the way to achieve their political objectives is to blow up women and children in school buses and university cafeterias and hospitals and the like. And that's our war too.
Okay, Richard, do you have any closing remarks for us before we wrap up?
No, I just want to thank you for inviting me. I think it was a good, lively discussion. I don't know that I've persuaded anyone. But,
I think you gave it your best shot and certainly kept us all entertained, and we thank you for being with us.
Thanks very much.